The Rejected One. The city of Silara Prime was a place of power, ruled by the strong. The Exilari people believed in strength above all else. If someone was weak, injured, or unable to fight, they were considered worthless. That was why Vela was alone. She limped through the crowded streets, her body aching. Her left leg was damaged beyond healing, and her right arm was weak. The accident that had crippled her was years ago, but no one cared. The Exilari had no room for the weak. She had once dreamed of becoming a great warrior, like her ancestors. But that dream was dead. Now she was just another forgotten outcast, struggling to survive in the shadows of a proud city. A kindness she did not expect. Vela sat near a market stall, watching others buy food. The smell of roasted meat filled the air. Her stomach growled, but she had nothing. No money, no home, no family. The market owner, a tall Xilari woman, glared at her. "Leave, cripple. You do not belong here." Vela lowered her head and turned away, too hungry to argue. But just as she was about to leave, a voice spoke behind her. "Here, take this." She turned and saw a human. He was tall, with dark brown hair and sharp blue eyes. His clothes were worn, but he looked strong, like someone who had seen battles. In his hand, he held a small loaf of bread. Vela stared at it, confused. No one had ever offered her food before. "Why?" she whispered. The human shrugged. "You look hungry." Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The moment the warm bread touched her fingers, her eyes burned with tears. No one had ever helped her. Not like this. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, a loud shout interrupted them. The guards arrive. "Human, step away from the outcast." 3 Xilari guards stormed toward them, their armor shining in the bright lights of the market. Each of them carried a shock baton, their faces filled with disgust. Vela froze. The human did not move. He simply glanced at the guards, his expression calm. The lead guard pointed at Vela. "This cripple is worthless. If she starves, it is her fate." Vela felt her chest tighten. She had heard those words so many times before, but now, with the human beside her, they felt heavier. The human frowned. "She's just hungry. That's not a crime." The second guard laughed. "It is for the weak." Vela lowered her head. She knew how this would end. The human would leave, just like everyone else. He would not risk himself for someone like her. But then, he didn't move. Instead, he stepped in front of her. "If you have a problem, take it up with me," he said, his voice calm but firm. The guards hesitated. They had not expected this. No one ever stood up for an outcast, especially not a human. Vela's eyes widened. Who was this man? Why was he doing this? The lead guard's expression darkened. "You dare challenge Xilari law?" The human crossed his arms. "I dare challenge cruelty." The first blow. The guard's face twisted in anger. Without warning, he swung his baton at the human's head. Vela gasped. She expected the human to fall, to be beaten like all who opposed the warriors. But he didn't. He moved fast. In a blink, he dodged, stepping to the side with perfect timing. The baton swung past his face, missing by inches. Before the guard could react, the human's hand shot out, grabbing the guard's wrist. With a sharp twist, he disarmed him in a second. The baton clattered to the ground. The crowd gasped. The other guards rushed forward, but the human was faster. He ducked, using his elbow to slam one guard in the chest. The Exilari warrior stumbled back, eyes wide with shock. Vela could not believe what she was seeing. This human was fighting back, and winning. The lead guard growled, "You dare attack the Xilari?" The human's eyes stayed calm. "I don't like bullies." The escape. Vela knew this was bad. The entire city would know what happened. The Xilari did not tolerate weakness, but they hated defiance even more. If they stayed, the human would be hunted. She grabbed his arm. "We have to go. Now." For a moment, he hesitated. Then, with a small nod, he picked up the baton, tossed it aside, and turned to follow her. They ran. Through the market, past dark alleyways, and into the shadows of the city. Behind them, the alarm sounded. The human looked at her as they hid in the shadows. "I'm David," he said, "and I think I just made a lot of enemies." Vela, still breathless, stared at him. "You're a fool." David chuckled. "Maybe, but I don't regret it." For the first time in years, Vela felt something strange inside her chest. Hope. A fight against fate. The city of Silara Prime was alive with chaos. Red alarms blared through the air, echoing off the towering buildings of metal and glass. Massive screens across the city flashed warning symbols, displaying the faces of two fugitives, a crippled Silari woman, a human outsider. Alert! The human traveler and the outcast Vela are enemies of the state. Report all sightings immediately. Vela sat hidden in the shadows of an old alley, her breath heavy, her heart pounding. Her body ached from running, but she didn't dare slow down. Beside her, the human, David, peeked around the corner, scanning the streets. His face was calm, too calm, like he was used to this kind of danger. "They're searching the area," he muttered. "We don't have much time." Vela swallowed hard. "Why did you do that?" David turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Do what?" Her hands trembled as she pointed to the city screens still displaying their faces. "You fought the guards. You stood up for me. No one does that." David sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't like watching innocent people suffer." Vela laughed bitterly. "I am not innocent. I am broken." David frowned. "Who told you that?" She fell silent. Everyone. For years, she had been told she was weak, useless, a failure. But now, sitting here, running from an entire city because a human had defended her, she began to wonder. Had they all been wrong? Hunted like prey. The sound of marching boots grew louder. Vela tensed. The guards were close. David motioned for her to follow. "We have to move. Stay close." Vela hesitated. She was slow. She would only slow him down. David must have seen the doubt on her face because he sighed and muttered, "Fine. Hold on." Before she could react, he lifted her onto his back. Her breath caught in her throat. "What are you?" "Helping." Then he ran. Faster than she ever could. Faster than she ever imagined. Vela held on tight, her mind spinning. No one had ever carried her. No one had ever cared enough. Escape into the unknown. They weaved through the maze of dark alleys, avoiding patrols, ducking under metal bridges, and leaping over barricades. David moved like a trained warrior, every step calculated. Vela had seen Silari fighters move with precision, but this was different. This was experience. This was survival. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the city's outer district, an abandoned industrial zone filled with rusted buildings and forgotten machines. David carefully lowered Vela to the ground. "We're safe, for now." Vela exhaled, her chest rising and falling. How are you so fast?" David smirked. "Good training. Bad decisions." Before she could ask what he meant, a loud hum filled the air. Vela's blood ran cold. Drones. She turned her head and saw 3 black metal machines floating in the sky, their red scanners searching the area. David grabbed her hand. "Move." They dashed into a half-collapsed building, pressing themselves against the wall as the drones passed overhead. Vela held her breath. She had been hunted before, but this was different. If they got caught, it wouldn't just be her life on the line. It would be his too. A dangerous truth. The drones passed without detecting them. For now, David let out a sigh of relief and sat down on a broken metal crate. Vela turned to him, her mind burning with questions. "Who are you, David?" He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Just a traveler." She narrowed her eyes. You fight too well to be just a traveler. David hesitated. Then he finally spoke. I used to be a soldier. Vela's breath caught. A soldier? From where? Earth. Vela frowned. Humans weren't warriors. They were traders, explorers, diplomats. She had never heard of a human who could fight like a Xelari. Why did you leave? She asked. David's expression darkened. Because I was tired of fighting wars for people who didn't care. A silence stretched between them. Vela understood that feeling. She had fought for the approval of her people her entire life, only to be cast aside the moment she became weak. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't alone in her pain. A fateful decision. David stood up. We can't stay here. Vela sighed. Then where do we go? David looked at her seriously. There's something I need to find on this planet. Something important. Vela's brow furrowed. What is it? David hesitated before saying, a hidden artifact. Something ancient. Something powerful. Vela's heart pounded. Ancient artifacts. On Xelera Prime. Her people had always hidden secrets from outsiders. She had always suspected that there was more to their past than they admitted. And now, a human traveler had come looking for something they had buried. She crossed her arms. And you think I can help? David gave her a small smile. You know this world better than I do. Vela wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to leave her alone. But she couldn't, because for the first time in her life, someone was giving her a choice. Stay and be hunted, or go and find a new purpose. She clenched her fists, then looked up at David. All right, I'm in. David grinned. Good, because we just got company. Vela turned her head, and her blood ran cold. A massive warship hovered in the distance, its lights scanning the city. The Xelari High Command had arrived. They weren't just fugitives now. They were Xelari's most wanted. The chase. The sky above Xelera Prime burned with red warning lights. Massive warships hovered in the distance, their engines thrumming like hungry beasts searching for prey. Across the towering cityscape, patrol drones zipped between metal towers, their red scanners flashing across the streets. The entire city was on high alert. 2 fugitives, a crippled outcast, and a mysterious human. And now, they were trapped. Hunted in the dead city, Vela and David crouched behind the remains of a half-collapsed structure, its steel beams bent and broken from an old explosion. The air smelled of rust, oil, and decay. Vela's breathing was shaky, her body weak. The last few hours had drained her. She wasn't built for running. Not anymore. But David, he barely looked tired. She watched him as he scanned the area, his sharp blue eyes calculating every possible escape route. His movements were precise, practiced. He wasn't just strong, he was trained. We need to move, he whispered, glancing toward the distant searchlights sweeping across the ruins. Vela shook her head. They've locked down the entire sector. There's nowhere to go. David's lips pressed into a thin line. There's always a way out. She sighed. Maybe for you, but I can't run like you do. David turned to her, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metallic device, a wrist-mounted holomap. Vela's eyes widened. Where did you get that? David smirked. I borrowed it. She frowned. You mean you stole it? Borrowed indefinitely, he corrected, from a Xelari soldier who won't be needing it anymore. Vela rolled her eyes, but she couldn't deny. It was impressive. David tapped a few buttons, and a holographic map appeared in the air, showing a 3-dimensional layout of the city. He pointed to a dark zone near the outskirts. This is where we need to go. The Undercrypt. Vela's stomach twisted. The Undercrypt. A forbidden place. A place of myths. Are you insane? She hissed. No one goes there. It's a graveyard. David shrugged. Exactly. Which means no one will follow us. Vela shook her head. You don't understand. People say there's something down there. Something ancient. Something cursed. David looked her dead in the eye. I don't believe in curses. I believe in survival. And right now, this is our only shot. A deep mechanical voice boomed through the city's speakers. Fugitives detected in the industrial district. Immediate termination authorized. David didn't hesitate. He grabbed Vela's hand and pulled her forward. No more waiting. We go now. The rooftop escape. Vela's legs burned as she stumbled after David, her mind screaming for rest. Above them, drones zipped through the air, scanning every alley. David took a sharp turn and led her toward a crumbling building, its metal walls covered in black scorch marks. We're going up, he said. Vela's eyes widened. Up? I can't. David didn't let her finish. He crouched down. Get on. Vela hesitated, but there was no time for pride. She climbed onto his back, and in one smooth motion, David jumped onto a rusted ladder hanging off the side of the building. With effortless strength, he climbed up, scaling the building like it was nothing. Vela held on tight, her heart racing. Who was this man? They reached the top of the building just as a squad of Sci-Fi soldiers entered the street below, weapons drawn. Where are they? One of them growled. They were right here, another barked. David exhaled. That was close. Vela, still breathless, smacked his shoulder. Next time, warn me. David grinned. Where's the fun in that? Before she could argue, a drone appeared above them. Vela's stomach dropped. David. But he was already moving. With a fluid motion, he grabbed a nearby metal pole, snapped it from the rooftop, and hurled it straight into the drone's scanner. The drone sparked, its circuits frying before it spiraled out of control and crashed onto the street below. Vela stared in shock. You just... David shrugged. Lucky throw. That was not luck. Okay, maybe a little skill. Vela groaned. You are unbelievable. And yet, I'm keeping us alive. Before she could argue, the warship in the distance shifted its trajectory, its massive cannons turning toward them. David cursed. They saw that. A deep hum rumbled through the air as the ship locked onto their position. Vela's blood went cold. They're going to fire on us. David grabbed her hand. Then we jump. Her eyes widened. Jump. That's... Boom. The rooftop beneath them exploded, sending metal and fire into the air. Vela screamed as she felt herself falling. David grabbed her midair, twisting their bodies to land onto a lower building's balcony. They crashed onto the metal floor, rolling to a stop. Pain shot through Vela's body, but she was alive. David groaned beside her. That was not fun. Vela coughed. You think. Above them, the warship hovered, scanning the wreckage. We need to move. Now. David pulled her up, and they stumbled toward the edge of the building. In the distance, Vela could see the entrance to the undercrypt, a massive black hole in the earth surrounded by ancient Sci-Fi ruins. She shivered. That place was not meant to be entered. And yet, they had no choice. David glanced at her. Are you ready? Vela exhaled. No, but let's go anyway. David grinned. That's the spirit. Hand in hand, they ran toward the darkness. A dark secret. The entrance to the undercrypt loomed before them, a massive chasm carved into the earth, its jagged edges crumbling into darkness. Vela shivered. The air felt different here, heavier, as if the planet itself feared this place. The Sci-Fi spoke of it in hushed whispers. It was a place of curses, a graveyard of forgotten warriors and forbidden knowledge. And now, she was about to step inside it. David crouched beside her, scanning the area. Behind them, the city burned with warning lights. The warship still hovered in the distance. Their enemies wouldn't wait forever. We need to move, he said, his voice steady. Vela swallowed hard. Are you sure about this? The undercrypt is forbidden for a reason. David smirked. Forbidden places usually have the best secrets. Vela sighed. You are impossible. And yet, you're still here. Before she could argue, a deep metallic groan echoed from the chasm. Something was waking up. Into the abyss. They descended carefully, stepping onto an ancient stone path that spiraled into the depths. The walls were covered in strange carvings, symbols older than any Xilari civilization. Vela ran her fingers across the stone. These markings, they're not Xilari. David frowned. Then who made them? She shook her head. I don't know. As they moved deeper, the temperature dropped, and a thin mist coiled around their ankles like ghostly fingers. The deeper they went, the stronger the feeling of something watching them became. Vela tried to push it aside, but it was there, whispering, calling. The forgotten chamber. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a massive stone door at the bottom of the path. It was carved with ancient symbols, glowing faintly with a deep blue energy. David reached out, pressing his hand against it. The door pulsed beneath his touch. It's reacting to me. Vela stepped forward, her heart pounding. She didn't know why, but she felt like she knew this place. She placed her hand beside David's. The glow flashed brighter. The door rumbled. Then, with a deep, earth-shaking groan, it split open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Inside, giant pillars stretched into the darkness, wrapped in glowing roots of an unknown plant. Strange floating orbs cast a dim blue light, illuminating the room in a ghostly glow. At the center of the chamber, a massive metallic structure stood, its surface covered in alien markings. Vela's breath caught. This isn't a tomb, it's a machine. David's eyes narrowed. And I think we just turned it on. The Guardians awaken. A deep, thunderous hum filled the chamber. The air vibrated, sending chills down Vela's spine. Then, from the shadows, figures emerge. Not Xilari, not human. Tall, armored constructs, their bodies shaped from the same glowing metal as the machine. Their eyes burned with blue fire. Vela's heart raced. What are they? David's hand went to his weapon. Not friendly, I'm guessing. The nearest construct raised its arm, a weapon forming from its forearm. Then, in a voice that shook the walls, it spoke. Unauthorized presence detected. Intruders must be eliminated. The constructs attacked. The battle in the dark. David shoved Vela behind a pillar as a blast of energy exploded where they had just been standing. Run, he yelled. Vela hesitated. What about you? David didn't answer. He was already moving, dodging between the constructs with terrifying speed. He grabbed a loose metal rod from the floor and used it like a weapon, blocking an incoming strike before slamming the rod into the nearest construct's core. The machine staggered, but it didn't fall. Vela clenched her fists. She wasn't just going to stand here and watch. Her eyes darted to the strange glowing roots wrapped around the pillars. If this was a machine, then maybe. She ran to the nearest one and placed her hands against it. The energy surged through her body. And then she understood. The symbols, the power. This place wasn't Xilari. It belonged to her ancestors, and she knew how to shut it down. The turning point. David dodged another strike, breathing hard. Vela, any time now. She focused, channeling the energy that pulsed through the roots. The air crackled. The symbols along the walls shifted. The constructs froze. One by one, their glowing eyes dimmed, their bodies going still. Silence. David exhaled, staring at them in disbelief. What did you do? Vela looked down at her hands, the faint blue energy still flickering around her fingers. She met his eyes. I just took control. David let out a breathless laugh. Well, that's new. Before Vela could respond, a deep rumbling shook the chamber. The massive machine at the center began to rise, unfolding massive mechanical limbs, its glowing core pulsing with power. A voice echoed through the room. Not mechanical, not artificial, but ancient. The hair has returned. Vela's breath caught in her throat. David looked at her, eyes wide. Ah, hair to what? Before she could answer, the ground beneath them collapsed. Everything went dark. The forgotten power. Darkness. Silence. Then, pain. Vela gasped awake, her body aching. Her arms and legs felt heavy. Her head pounded, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she was even alive. Then she heard David's voice. Vela, wake up. Her eyes fluttered open. Dim, flickering blue light cast eerie shadows around them. They were no longer in the chamber above. They had fallen into a deeper part of the undercrypt. She sat up slowly, wincing. Where are we? David stood a few feet away, scanning their surroundings. His face was tense, but his voice was steady. Somewhere below the ruins, whatever that machine was, it didn't kill us. It dropped us here. Vela looked around. The cavern walls weren't like the ones above. These weren't made of stone. They were made of something else. Smooth metal, ancient technology. And in the center of the vast underground space, a massive structure rose from the ground. It pulsed with soft, golden light, its surface covered in engraved symbols that felt familiar. Vela's breath caught. She knew this place, not from stories, from somewhere deeper, somewhere in her blood. David watched her closely. You've seen this before, haven't you? She nodded slowly. I don't know how, but I have. The words came out before she could stop them. This is not a tomb. It's a cradle. David frowned. A cradle. Before she could explain, a low, echoing voice filled the air. Not from a speaker, not from a machine. From everywhere. The hair has awakened, a history erased. The golden light brightened, illuminating massive walls covered in intricate ancient carvings. The symbols moved, shifting like liquid metal, forming images. Vela staggered back, clutching her chest. The moment she looked at them, memories flooded her mind. Memories that were not hers. She saw a time before the Auxiliary Empire, before war, before conquest. A time when her ancestors ruled. Not as warriors, not as conquerors, as guardians of something sacred. She saw glimpses of great structures floating in the sky, powered by the same golden energy surrounding them now. She saw her people standing tall, not as broken outcasts, but as leaders, scholars, protectors. And then she saw the betrayal. The warriors, the ancestors of the current Silari rulers, turned on them. They erased history, buried the truth. They destroyed the legacy of Vela's people and rewrote history to fit their rule. Her chest tightened. Her entire life, she had been told she was weak, useless, a mistake. But the truth was, she wasn't weak. She was never meant to be a warrior. She was meant to be something else. Something more. David stepped closer, his expression unreadable. Vela, what's happening? She turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. They lie to us. All of them. David raised an eyebrow. Who? Vela clenched her fists. The Xilari. The High Command. Everyone. My people weren't weak. They were powerful. They were the ones who built all of this. And the ones in charge now. They stole it. David exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Dan. She shook her head. Not just that. They erased us. They made sure no one would ever remember. She took a deep breath. Until now. The test. As she spoke, the golden structure in the center of the chamber shifted. A pathway opened, leading toward what looked like a throne. No, a control seat. David gave her a wary look. I don't like where this is going. Vela felt something pulling her forward. An instinct, a force buried in her bones. This was meant for her. She was meant to sit there. David tensed as she stepped forward. Vela, wait. But she had already placed her hands on the seat's glowing armrests. The moment she did, the entire chamber came alive. Energy surged through her, filling every nerve in her body with power. Her mind expanded, reaching beyond the walls, beyond the planet. She could feel everything. The machines, the ruins, the distant echoes of something older than the Xilari Empire. A deep voice resonated from within the cradle. The heir has returned. The trial begins. David's eyes widened. Trial? What trial? The room shifted. The walls became liquid, forming shapes, visions, memories. Suddenly, Vela was no longer in the chamber. She was somewhere else, floating in a vast star-filled void. And standing before her was herself, but not her as she was now. A version of herself that was stronger, taller, covered in golden energy, her crippled limbs restored, her eyes glowing with wisdom. The reflection of herself spoke. Are you ready to reclaim what was lost? Vela's heart pounded. I don't know. The reflection tilted its head. Then you are not ready. A wave of force hit her, and suddenly, she was falling. Back in reality. David watched in horror as Vela's body convulsed. Golden energy crackled around her, her fingers gripping the throne so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Vela, he shouted, but she didn't respond. Then, the entire chamber shook. The golden energy pulsed outward, activating something massive beneath them. A deep mechanical roar echoed through the ruins. The Xilari High Command warship, still hovering above the undercrypt, suddenly lost control, its systems failing as the golden energy hacked into its core. On the surface, the Xilari leaders panicked as their technology betrayed them. Vela's power was awakening, and it was changing everything. A new future. The skies above Silara Prime were different now. For centuries, the city had been ruled by warriors, their law absolute, their strength unquestioned. The weak were abandoned, the past was erased, and history belonged only to those who could fight for it. But everything had changed. The true heir had returned, and the Xilari Empire would never be the same again. The fall of the High Command. Deep within the Xilari High Command Tower, panic spread like wildfire. The rulers, once feared across the stars, now watched in horror as their systems collapsed. The room was filled with the sharp beeping of failing consoles and the desperate shouts of technicians struggling to regain control. A massive holographic screen flickered, displaying the same message across every Xilari outpost, warship, and colony. Authority reclaimed, adjusting planetary control. The head of the Xilari ruling council, Chancellor Varkash, slammed his fist against the console. This is impossible. She was crippled, a mistake. How can she? Another council member, Councillor Ocean, whispered in disbelief. She was never weak. We made her weak. Varkash turned to his advisors, rage burning in his dark violet eyes. This is not over. We still have control over. Before he could finish, the tower shuddered. The massive warship hovering above the city powered down completely, its lights flickering as if its very core had been drained. The ruling council's own security systems turned against them. The walls of the chamber shifted, sealing the exits. Then, a voice echoed through every speaker in the room. A voice they never thought they'd hear again. You stole our past. The air turned electric as the holographic screen flickered. The image changed, no longer just a system notification. Now, it displayed Vela, standing tall, glowing with the golden power of her ancestors. Her gaze burned with righteous fury. Now we take it back. Then, the power to the council chamber cut off completely. For the first time in Xilari history, the rulers had lost their throne. A new beginning. From the top of the ancient ruins, Vela watched as the massive warship fell from the sky, its weapons disabled, its power stolen by the very technology that Xilari had buried. Below, thousands of Xilari citizens gathered, their eyes filled with uncertainty, fear, and something new. Hope. David stood beside her, arms crossed. So, what now? Vela took a deep breath. She had spent her entire life being nothing, being forgotten. But now she had the chance to rewrite everything. Now, she said softly, we rebuild. She stepped forward, addressing the auxiliary people. For the first time, she was not ignored, not dismissed. They listened. For too long, we have let strength define us, she said, her voice steady. For too long, we have cast aside those who could not fight. We have destroyed our own history. We have built an empire on fear. She looked out at the crowd, her golden-lit eyes meeting theirs without shame. No more. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The warriors, the civilians, even the former outcasts, all of them watching, waiting. We are more than just warriors. We are more than just conquerors. Our ancestors knew the truth. Our strength was never just in battle. It was in knowledge, in unity, in wisdom. She raised a single glowing hand, and across the city, the ancient energy of her ancestors surged to life. Buildings repaired themselves. The abandoned, broken districts where the weak had been cast aside came alive with power. The streets lit up with the forgotten golden light of a civilization that had once thrived, not by destroying, but by creating. The auxiliary empire was no longer a kingdom of war. It would become something new, something better. For the first time, the people cheered. David's decision. As the city changed around them, David stood quietly, watching Vela with a thoughtful expression. She turned to him. You should go. David raised an eyebrow. Really? After everything? She sighed. You came here for something else. I don't even know why you stayed. David smirked. I stayed because I saw something worth fighting for. Vela met his gaze. And now? David exhaled, then looked out over the city. Now, I think I want to see what happens next. She laughed softly. So you're staying? David grinned. Yeah, someone has to make sure you don't get yourself killed. She rolled her eyes. I just overthrew an empire, David. I think I can handle myself. David chuckled. Aha, we'll see. Epilogue. The war that never came. The auxiliary high command never recovered. Some fled into exile, refusing to accept the new rule. Others surrendered, realizing that their way was dead. The empire, once feared across the stars, was no longer a place of conquest and war. It became a place of restoration, learning, and progress. Vela, once a forgotten cripple, became something more. She became a leader, a symbol of change, a force that would shape the future of not just her people, but the entire galaxy. And at her side stood David, warrior, traveler, friend. Together, they had rewritten history, and the galaxy would never forget them.